day, viewers. Today I have Saurabh Ghosh from Bharat Pay with me, and I would like for him to introduce himself. Saurabh, brief introduction about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. So I'm Saurabh, around 13 odd years of WorkX, doing data science when the data science was not a buzzword. And my journey has been quite interesting. Started off in the insurance space doing actuarial models.
Okay.
And the next 8 years was into consulting at Deloitte and KPMG, where doing risk consulting and management consulting in the data science space, solving different kind of customer value management problems and underwriting problems for different banks and FMCGs. And the last two stint has been with the top two fintechs, Paytm and now currently with
Bharat Pay.
Right,
Okay.
where again solving Paytm was more about consumer. Bharat Pay has been mostly about merchants and doing different kind of data science problems, starting from top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel. Which can be
What
like,
a journey.
yeah, which can be like optimization, cross-sell, upsell, underwriting related problems.
Awesome. So you started from actuarial, went into underwriting, then solved for consumers, now working on merchant analytics. Awesome, what a journey. Now, data scientists, for people who don't know, data scientists are considered endangered species. Why are there so few quality data scientists?
So in my opinion, it requires, it requires a bit amount of hard work and effort to become a good data scientist, a quality industry level data scientist. So it's like, let's take one step back. What is the ingredients to become a data scientist?
Okay, what are the ingredients to become a data scientist?
Essentially, it's maths and science. So
Maths and science.
basically, you need to have a solid understanding of probabilities, linear algebra, calculus. So that's the basic requirement. And then you should have
All the scary subjects in school you're reminding us of. All right.
and then you top it up with the programming skills. You need to have the ability to code, right? So that you can bring value to the table, right?
Okay.
Because theory will take you to a certain level, but if
So you need to be a mathematician and an engineer.
exactly. Then when you mix these two things, that's the secret sauce that requires you to become a good data scientist at an industry level, where you're able to solve problems. Because the courses, curriculum, or the theory, or the lot of marketing gigs which is happening, which kind of talks about it's not that big deal, but there is seriously some effort that requires when you're actually solving a problem, because the data is not it's stale, it's not in the right shape and form. There is a lot of quality problem, governance problem. So you need to really put a lot of effort in getting that sorted out. And then you look to solve that problem that you're looking to solve through intelligence. And the last but not the least, getting your leadership onboarded to it from a value point of view.
That is also the job of a data scientist.
You can also bring the
So
value.
you need mathematics, you need engineering, you need the ability to influence and convince people. That's what makes it
Storytelling
a
is very important aspect.
Storytelling is a very important aspect.
Because essentially you're a data scientist or a data science team is mainly a strategic team, right? For any organization. So essentially you're more or less dealing with CXOs or one level down of CXOs. And they are mostly business guys. So you need to have that ability to translate these complex problems into, business related solutions. So that they can sponsor and they can adopt, and then the real value starts coming.
If you talk mathematical or coding, they would not agree, but you speak business language into business terms. That's what they would understand.
Like an example, if I give you, a CXO will come and say that my churn is 20%. How can I solve it through data science? That's it.
Awesome. That's beautiful, isn't it? Instead of asking which LLM to implement.
No,
Right?
that never happens.
Awesome. Okay. Tell us about some of the business problems you're trying to solve using data science.
So currently, in the current context, so we are looking to solve engagement problems, which is churn related problems, which is merchant value management sort of things we're looking at, where through data science, who is likely to leave my network, or whom I can cross-sell and upsell, so that then I can extract more value out of those existing merchants. So that's one big area that we look to solve. The second big area is, which is more on where we are using GenAI and LLM is essentially, for fraud behavior. So what is happening that, there are, during the onboarding time, the field agents would essentially, what they will do is that essentially they will upload fraudulent documents to gain incentives from us. Right. And essentially,
So it's not an actual merchant they're onboarding, it's just a kind of a dummy, or
it can be an actual merchant also, or
a falsified document.
but not with the right document they're getting uploaded. So essentially using
detection.
LLM and GenAI, we are able to figure out, okay, those documents that they have uploaded, or what they're doing is also that they're uploading the same document again. So let's say, that document has been uploaded into the system and now they're again uploading that document into the system. So using the artificial intelligence, we are able to figure out, okay, these set of documents have already been uploaded into our system, and we flag it that, okay, buddy, you're not getting incentive for this. So that's a problem. Then there's a big part of underwriting problems, which is basically, either a consumer loan or a working capital loan, whom to give, at what interest to give, what tenure to give. So there is there also heavily, data science is used to build those models.
They're almost across the business. So you're preventing churn, you're predicting churn, you're upselling and cross-selling, so increasing the share of wallet, and you're also detecting fraud, and you're then doing underwriting as how much loan to give, whether to give or not, and what interest to give.
Right.
All right. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
There's just so few problems you're trying to solve.
Yeah. These are some of the.
But it is interesting. You see, data science as a subject and AI ML has existed since 1950s. It took off in 2000s, and enterprises use that. But public has come to know about it lately with generative AI coming in. But generative AI is a different game. AI ML, advanced analytics is a different game. So how was your journey as a data scientist going from classic AI to generative AI?
I think in this profession, you need to continuously learn and upgrade yourself.
Okay.
Just like any other profession, as a matter of fact, right? So I think that's the simple secret sauce, if I have to put it in simple words. However, as I said, when I started my career, then stats and maths were the core, and this entire evolution has happened because of the computing, right?
Yes.
Earlier, the compute power was not that great, so therefore these models still existed, right? But
neural networks have been around for decades.
Neural network, linear regression, logistic regression, decision trees.
Yeah.
These have existed since decades. But the real value started coming in when the compute came in, and the power of internet also.
Okay.
These are the two accelerators, in my opinion, because you started collecting more data about your customers, about your merchants. And at the same point in time, now you have the infrastructure to also store and bring intelligence, extract intelligence out of it.
But how did you, building let's say a random forest model is very different from, let's say, fine-tuning an LLM or prompting an LLM with different skill sets. Did you find any challenges adapting to the LLM and the generative AI language world from the numbers world?
As I said at the earlier point of view, that the fundamentals are same.
Fundamentals are same.
Linear algebra, calculus, probabilities. The same theory is getting used in your LLMs also. So if the basics are good, then migrating and learning a new technology is not a problem. That is point number one for me. So hence, my basics was pretty cool. So learning the new stuff was not a problem as such. Of course, when you are changing your landscape from numbers to unstructured data, so-called, right, image, text, voice, it requires a little bit of a different mindset, a different sort of a momentum you need, a different kind of a persona you need to solve it. So that challenge is always there. That friction will always be there, because when you're working on the structured data, you tend to have a thought process. I would not say deterministic. It's basically in a structured problem when you're solving, there is a lot of storytelling, lot of analysis, hypothesis that you need to work on because the business understands this very well.
Correct.
Now, this side of the part, it is very outcome driven. Like, for example, given a photo which is valid or not, output is very defined.
Classification, yeah.
Right? It's a very defined. Or, the language, like you have written a prompt and you're getting an answer. It's a generative
it's not
test.
a hypothesis case.
So in that
We're not
way,
testing hypothesis.
if you are able to add value, the business understands these side of problems very quickly. Here you have to do a lot of explanation, you have to do a lot of preparation, a lot of insights. So then what happens is when you are working in one space thoroughly into it, then migrating becomes a little there is a bit of fiction there. However, from a fundamental standpoint, there is not much of an issue if your fundamentals are right.
Okay.
Of course, hands-on and project experience matter. So
would you have a view on one is easier than the other?
I would say in the current context, GenAI and LLM, because you don't have to really build the models.
Because they have been built.
Yeah,
right.
they have already been built. So you need to be really good with your software engineering skills.
Software. So more software engineering.
Packaging, application side. Yeah, you need to be good with your application side. Yeah.
Yes.
You need to be good with the application side of it because the big players are already, building that intelligence for you.
Okay.
Because it requires huge compute, as we all know, to build these large language models.
Okay.
Whereas on those side, you have to also apply a lot of thinking to do that. So that's basically the shift, if I have to put it.
That's the shift required.
To be a good GenAI guy, you need to really have good engineering skills to stitch everything, the systems, the prompts, the fine-tuning, and then the DevOps part comes in. So all those things are very essential and core to be a GenAI engineer, so to speak.
Whereas on the classic AI side, you have to be good at engineering, but you have to be good at mathematics and statistics as well.
Because there's a lot of distribution in data that you have to look at. So that's basically the fundamental difference.
That coming back to data, you initially said there's a lot of work that is required on data. Just for the benefit of audience, in 100 units of work that is required to do a classic AI project, what percentage of those 100 units goes in data preparation and what percentage goes in actually training the model?
70%.
70% is data, right? That's 70%. So AI training is just 30%. 70% is data. Is it the same on generative AI, or generative AI, the data cleansing effort is lesser because the model is already trained to some extent?
So essentially, what happens in GenAI space, the foundation models are already there, right?
Yeah.
So what you're doing is either you're doing a prompt engineering to extract the information, or on your custom data, you're making you're doing a data pre-processing and then applying the foundation models to get the intelligence out of it.
Correct.
So the effort is also there because, essentially how you will sort of do it, that first you will do a prompting to get that, okay, what is the baseline of my intelligence? And if I'm not happy with it, then essentially
it's an iterative.
Correct. So that's the thing.
Project.
That's the thing.
But
the
it's
effort
not
is there.
70-30?
No, it will not be 70-30, but 50% would be at least.
Data. But data is huge, whether it's 50 or 70, and it is always underestimated in a AI project how much time data takes.
Plays a very data preparation, getting the data ready for either a GenAI project or a classical model plays a very important role, and it takes a lot of time to do it because if any player who is working on this space, especially in the GenAI space, because in GenAI space right now we are looking at the prompting side of it and fine-tuning side of it, but when you're fine-tuning it, you need to prepare the data for fine-tuning and that is so we don't have really off-the-shelf
and have a diverse data set, right? So this is the element of bias that comes in,
correct,
so on and so forth, right?
Yes. So those kind of challenges are there. So essentially, data prep remains pretty much similar. Either you talk about any problems.
Okay, talk about any problem. Data challenges remain. Now, talking about challenges, I want this is two questions, but the same thing. As a data scientist, what are the challenges you face within the organization to drive adoption of AI?
great question. So I would say the way, one is of course onboarding the stakeholders. It's very important, and that is where the roadblock is there.
Okay.
So if you do it in the right way, in the strategic way, and then basically a lot of problems get sorted. So basically getting a sponsor, right? Because either you are a working
Sponsor.
either you are a consultant or working internally. Either in both the facets, you need to get your CXOs or your business owners onboarded on the problem that you are solving.
Okay.
Right. So I think that's one thing which I would say that everyone across the board has to do some convincing in some shape and form. As I said, that business team is not going to come and say that I want this model or that model unless that problem is already solved in the firm and there is a further optimization or something around that is required. Otherwise, the business team will come and say that these are the problems I'm facing. Now tell me how can you solve it through data.
You have to solve business problems that they are facing as of today.
Because at the end of the day, if you don't solve business problems, there is no value.
There is no value.
And the second aspect is bringing value on the table using data science, right? Because at the end of the day, there is that typical Indian context where that Maruti ad kitna deti hai, right? So you need to because data science
business, right?
Yeah,
it's business.
At the end of the day, it's a business. So that is another aspect that you need to really factor in. And that's why the mapping of the use case that you're solving to the value becomes a very important thing. Although it is very difficult at upfront to sort of factor out what is the value I'm going to get. Because given it is probabilistic in nature, you really cannot quantify that, by using this, I'm going to get a 20% increment, 5% increment, or a 10% increment. So these are the two things. And of course, and then the data. Ek to hota hai, you've done all these things. Now, okay, sign off is there. Now running after the data. The marathon starts there where you're looking at the data.
So all through. So getting the sponsorship, to focusing on a business problem, to getting the data, these are the challenges. As I said, I have two questions, the same thing, but from different perspectives. If you were to put yourself in the shoes of your CEO, Nalin Negi is your CEO. He used to be with SBI Cards. He is a colleague from SBI Cards. So if you were to put yourself in Nalin Negi's shoes, what challenges do you see for AI adoption and AI transformation within the organization?
Transparency.
Transparency
is one something, right?
What do you mean by transparency?
So most of these AI models are black box models.
AI model. Okay, explainability.
Transparency, explainability, governance.
Okay.
These are something which still now we haven't. Unlike the traditional models, right? On the GenAI piece, this is black box, and especially if you are in the space of BFSI. Right.
Yeah.
It is very important.
The regulator will ask you.
Yeah, there's a lot of explanation and questions needs to be answered accordingly. So that's why I believe
that's a very important point.
Yeah, that's very
the
important.
Transparency and explainability of generative AI models. It's a black box, and financial services being a highly regulated industry, you need to be able to explain and be transparent about how you're using your model.
Exactly. So I think that would be one thing which I would say from a CXO point of view. Which will be there. So you do a trade-off then.
You do a trade-off.
A critical problem, a critical business problem, you would like to solve through more transparent stuff, where there is a room for experimentation. You would like to use these black box solutions. So you do that trade-off, because so that you sort of get the best of both the worlds.
Okay.
Yeah.
My next question is, and this is advice to other enterprises, should one look to build their own team of data scientists and in-house AI capability, or should enterprises look to have partners for AI capability? What would you say the approach enterprises should adopt?
It depends on the deep pockets that the enterprise has.
Okay.
If you're starting early, right, then maybe, having consultants with you sort of speeds up your entire process.
Okay.
But when you really grow, right, it makes sense to have some in-house team because then, it's essentially how you should sort of operate when you are sort of growing is critical stuff. So I like to give that example of a car.
Okay.
where the engine needs to stay in house.
Engine stay house, the wheels and the
Yes, right.
the engine and the steering.
Yeah, that stays in house.
In-house, but the rest of it
You
you
can-
can have partners for. Okay. So it's not either or, it's both.
Yes,
It's
you
both.
need that.
It's a
because
combination.
You need that because sometimes, again, depending on the which facet of the business journey you are, right? At what stage of a business journey? If you are if you're high on cash, then you would like to be more aggressive about a lot of things. If you're starting up early or you're in the mid of your journey, so those also are the factors which would also determine.
Yeah.
So there is no right and wrong answer to it,
Right
that
and wrong
it's an in-house or an outsource, because you need both the things
Use you both
depending
the
on what kind of space you are into.
Yeah.
Like, for
That's
example, a GenAI, a consulting company, right, who can do a lot of quick POCs for me, and I don't want to invest my team's bandwidth on that.
Uh-huh.
So maybe I will,
Leverage
engage
the
with a consulting company who can tell me what are the POCs, because they have access to the wider network.
Correct.
They tell me what is the POC that is happening in your industry, and then a quick POC which tells me that, okay, what is the value which is there, and then it makes me to take more smart decisions. Should I do it in house or sort of outsource it?
What would be the advice you would give to enterprises who are embarking on a AI transformation journey? 3 best practices from your experience.
Clarity on the roadmap.
Clarity on the roadmap. Be clear about what you're trying to do.
That's very
Okay.
important, because I think, and you cannot achieve everything at day one. So that's
Everything
very,
can't be
very,
done in day one.
Yeah, that's one thing. Second is reality check on the infrastructure.
Reality take on the infrastructure.
And
does the infrastructure include data?
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, or I will break it into 2 parts. Infrastructure, basically, do you have the platform to do it?
You have the platform.
And
Okay.
then the data is there.
Data.
Are you collecting enough data to do any build that intelligence or not?
Okay.
So I think, and then of course, last but not the least, which kind of gets cut across is the skills. You need to really hire good guys, good skilled people, and then that's where a decision comes. You want to do in-house or you want to outsource it, and then that is a function of the vision of the CEO or the board member, that how they want to build their company.
Or I want to build a company.
So I think that
So clarity of roadmap, be realistic about the infrastructure and the vision
cost will be there to build these things. There is a cost associated to it, and so you need to put money on the table, and then not look to have immediate realization of value.
Okay.
It will take some time.
Now
to get
talking about immediate realization of value,
Yes.
you said that it is important, right? ROI, it's all about value. Could you share, to the extent that you can, what are some of the benefits your organization, your other organizations have it seen in real life benefiting from AI?
So I can talk about. So I'm not going to name the org,
Okay.
just for confidential in NDA. So for one org, I was doing this underwriting models, right? So essentially, we built smarter application scorecards,
Okay.
and we were able to increase the lending 2x.
How does smarter scorecard help you? You lend more. So earlier you were
You
not
lend
giving people
So what happened? How it
more
happened?
customers got through the door.
Yeah. So what happened that the intelligence which was there, it was so the firm was in a growth mode, and we were not able to give more loans to more customers because there was a risk factor to it also, right? Because
Correct. Of course.
so we need to address we need to address this, that we can grow also, and at the same point in time the risk also kind of reflects this
Cost of credit remains.
So essentially, there are methods of building models, and using those methods and applying those technologies and methodologies into your application scorecard. Essentially, what happened that we were able to target more pace at the same risk, slightly higher, but it was kind of a pretty good trade-off. And so the methodology, which is a very known methodology, is called reject inference methodology, which is called. That's the statistical method, which is essentially
Reject inference.
So if you're using that, we were able to get more swap-ins pretty much at a similar.
Similar. So double the number of.
Kind of,
Awesome. Okay. Last question. In your entire journey, specifically, especially for the last 2 years or 3 years with generative AI, what has been one learning that you have had that you would share with the audience?
Oh, it's very fast paced.
It's very fast paced, huh?
Yeah. So I think that is, so continuously there are new frameworks coming in, and it is and I'm waiting for this little bit of stabilization so that okay, LangChain this is the framework for LangChain. This is for Vision. So that is one thing, because I think that's a great learning for me. So amazing from a technology standpoint, that innovation that is happening. It is
The
just
speed of innovation is
and
unbelievable.
speed of knots that is happening, and to keep up from an applied part of it, as an applied data scientist, it becomes a little tricky, because what happens that there's so much of news marketing that is going on, and all of a sudden you're saying, do you know this, do you know that?
And can you give it yesterday?
Yeah, and there's a new model, new version which is there, and then for some reason you don't know it, right? So that's the fun and exciting part of it. So for me, as another learning, which is like, it has certainly eased up the act of doing the exercises or the projects, the models, has really fastened up. Like the coding bit has become really smooth after GenAI. Earlier you would look into the stack flows, you would search the web for all the issues. But
I want to dig into this. Sorry, I know I asked you that was the last question, but it is about this learning benefit for the audience. Coding, as you said, is an essential skill set for a data scientist. So again, going back to that 100 units of effort, let's say you used to spend 20 units in coding earlier before generative AI. How much is this 20 now?
It has really considerably reduced.
So less
Maybe
than
30,
10, less than
30% I would say.
30%.
Yeah, because
Wow.
what has happened that now all you need to do is write English. So essentially the way you have
And
to
then
think,
debug, iterate.
so the way it's gonna happen, that if you know what you want, the system is smart enough to give you that answer. So that's how. So
But sometimes you have to figure out what you want. Then it can take longer.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
if you know what you want, it's 1/3 the effort of earlier.
because then you just prompt
That's
it and you get
that-
the answer.
If you're not leveraging generative AI for coding, you might want to start doing that today, because it saves you 2/3 of the time. Thank you so much, Saurabh Ghosh. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.